Waiting for image. Boy, I'm so smooth at this. I'm terrible at this. I need Billy here all the time. And the problem is he's in Atlanta. Okay, so hey everybody, welcome. This is one of those things where I do all the production and I'm the talent. So welcome everybody. Thanks for everybody for showing up, coming out today. We got a number of people here. Thank you very much. I'm gonna go over a few things and then we'll get to questions. First off, the pile of rectifiers in the thumbnail for the live stream belongs to my good friend and lost brother Fluff from Riffs, Beards, and Gear. I understand from him directly that this week he actually even acquired yet another one that was so clean he could not say no. Something he had to have. I need to thank Billy Jones, who is our guest moderator today. You'll notice him in the stream. Really good guy and moderator to the stars with my friend Rick Beato down in Atlanta. So he's doing that remotely. And the inimitable Phil Minion is off on vacation. And I convinced him to go fishing and not sit on the dock and moderate for us today instead. I want to remind everybody that I've got a new-ish Instagram account up, so you can get there at 5 Watt World and find me over there if you want to see what's kind of going on in 5 Watt World on a more regular basis. You can see that. Let's see. So let's see who's in the chat. Everybody say hi. There's Dan Bailey. Dan lives right up the road from me. It's almost silly to have Dan in the chat. He should just be here as a guest. So let me just update you on what I'm working on. I started working on a video. I'm going to do 3 videos that are sort of following my own process for thinning out gear. Everything's gotten loaded up again. It's time to thin out the room that's outside of this room. So that's something we need to do. And I started working on that. And the first one was actually the suggestion of my editor, my script editor, Perry, who suggested I actually go ahead and read Marie Kondo's book, The Magic of Tidying Up. I think that's the title. And I actually was really surprised at how easy it was for me to read through that. She kind of focuses on cleaning out clothes and, ephemera in your house. But I really found it very easy to start applying the theories there. I think I even mentioned it a couple weeks ago, that the theories really are around thinking about who you want to be as a player, basically picturing your ideal life, if that is the way to put it. So I was working on that, and then out of the blue, I had a chance to have David Hamburger from Truefire and his own Fretboard Confidential channel fame, maybe to play some Martin guitar on a video. And I've been wanting to do a Martin short history for a long time, been saving it. I've got the big book right here, the Martin guitar, A History by Richard Johnston and Dick Boak. This is the book. This is the one. I've got piles of research materials around the room now. I started writing that script today. That should be out in 2 weeks, 10 days to 2 weeks since I started writing script now. That'll go through there. Let's see. So that's coming. Let me say hi to folks. Hey Quincy, I got some people here that I recognize from Jeff's stream. I have to thank Jeff Mackerlane for hooking me up with David Hamburger, an old friend of his that lives out in Austin, has been lived out there since about 2000. Dan Brooks, Matt, Armando Diaz, Luke Simpkins, Laguna Palms, Bill Clement. Hey Bill. Serena, I think that's Serena from Germany. She's a blues singer there. David Belcher, Sammy Rabin, Ivan Romanenko. I'm still working on that name, Ivan. Okay. So I'm going to do what I've kind of settled into doing at the beginning of the live streams, which is first thing, I think it's become kind of a tradition that I run over the things that I got wrong. And this got a really big start when I did the junior video, and I got a great email from a guy that now works in another big company, but he was the artist relation guy when he was at Gibson. He was at Gibson for 10 years when Billy Joe Armstrong did his signature guitars, and he basically said, really loved the video. You got pretty much everything about the Billy Joe guitar wrong, but why would you know? Got some other people chiming in here. Cowtown Customs and Adam Gotteridge. That's great. Rafael Andreas Bonilla Giraldo. I love that. That's a name, man. I love that. 6-string slinger. So the things I got wrong. Let's do that. I'm not delaying. I'm not stalling. Before I do that, let me actually thank Fluff and John Cordy in particular, who played on the Boogie video. If John didn't have the collection that he has, I don't know. I don't know if I'd have done the video right now. And I really, really enjoy John's channel. And of course, I really enjoy Fluff's channel. Fluff's been really supportive to my channel. And he's become a good friend. It's been really fun. And John, same thing. We Zoom meeting, Google meetings all the time from Cornwall. So I've learned some stuff since the video came out. The video's had a really hot run this last week. It's at we're at about 90,000 views for a week for my little channel. That's a lot. By the way, last week I broke 150,000 subscribers, which actually is interesting. The whole YouTube analytics world, we could spend a lot of time talking about that. But the reality is the channel does about 400,000 views a month, but we only have 150,000 subscribers, which is it's an interesting statistic to me. But John and Fluff have done a lot to help out with the short histories, and I really, really appreciated their help. So the first and most glaring one that everybody helped me with in the comments is that the title of the tune actually is Sympathy for the Devil, not Symphony for the Devil, which is what I said. And I think my title is a good title. I wasn't there. I was a wee child when they were titling that, probably in the mid-'60s when that tune was recorded. You guys are probably better at this than I am, so then you need to let us know. Let me know when that was recorded. So that was the first one. The other one, I had a lot of people correcting me, and I actually kind of implied this in the video without coming all out and saying it, that Andy Timmons, I think what I said in the video was that artists often found themselves not using the new stiletto amp that came out around the time of the Lone Stars, but in fact used their old Marshalls. Because I had actually read and heard Andy Timmons talk about how he ended up using his old Plexis on that record. But the reality is he did actually use a Lone Star on one tune, the Headed for the Ditch tune, the chicken picking Telecaster one. But the other reality is he toured that record as a trio, which I thought was really great because it's pretty clear on the record, even though it is sort of generally recorded as a trio. There's places where parts overlap where they clearly did some overdubbing. So that was a cool thing. He toured with a pair of Lone Stars, and then he was using BB preamps and Boss blues drivers. There's a great rig rundown, not a rig rundown video really per se, that Daniel about building his pedal board, I think really on the heels of that. That's really when I started listening to Andy Timmons, was around that time. But that Dan Steinhardt and Andy go through the whole rig, and he talks about how he uses the blues driver as sort of an always on and then kicks it up. So anyway. Raphael coming right back at me. Keith Williams is a hell of a name too. Thank you, Raphael. I appreciate it. The mission to record electric gear and more gear. More people are signing in. Good. Mark Williams. Yeah, Mark, I think I didn't start the stream soon enough. Okay, so that's the Andy Timmons bit. A lot of people asked why I didn't spend X amount of time on their favorite amp. And, inevitably, with a company history as long as Mesa Boogies, I've got to leave some amps out. I've just got to have some pieces out. I shudder to think how many specific Martin guitars I'm going to have to leave out to be able to do a 30-minute Martin guitar history. That should be huge. So I did leave some out. They were particularly, I thought of note was that I didn't mention particularly the 5-watt mode on the Mark V 525, and I didn't talk about at length the Cali Tweed 2-watt mode. I've actually had a lot of people recommend that amp to me, but to be perfectly blunt, it runs contrary to my light rig search of all times. I mean, it does probably way more, has way, with 4 6v6s, it has a way more wattage than I probably need for the kind of music I play. And it weighs 50 pounds, it weighs 49 pounds. So that's why it hasn't sort of gotten to the top of the list there. People are teasing Billy. Good. David Cromwell, you just keep teasing Billy. Don't distract him from the work here. Fluff says we should do a book on rectifiers. He could tell me the story and I'd write it up. So the other thing that happened this week, I said it in the comments early in the chat before we got going, is that, before I did the video, I didn't know anybody at Mesa. And I had so many comments in the stream, in the comments on the video about rectifiers and the SLO, that I went ahead and I reached out to Mesa, and I reached out to Mike Soldano. Mike, I didn't give him a lot of time to get back, so I'm sure Mike, by all accounts, is just the nicest guy. Beato knows him, and he told me that he's just the sweetest guy. And the people at Soldano, actually, though Mike doesn't own the company anymore, were very quick to give me Mike's direct email address. So I emailed him. If I learn more, I will share more next week. Bill Sanderson said he might have to buy a Kelly Tweed. Yeah, you might, Bill. You might, just for the rest of us, just to kind of check that box for the rest of us. But I did get a chance to get on the phone with Doug West and I mentioned him in the video. Doug was a very early employee. He's been at Mesa for 39 years. He told me that Mike Bettinelli is still there as well. He was the second employee ever, building amps in the home of tone up in the mountains in Lagunitas. So it was really fun talking to Doug, and not the least of which, I'll be perfectly honest. I don't go out of my way to talk to people at the companies when I'm trying to do a short history, because I don't really feel like it's my job to tell their story. It's their job to tell their story. I had a really good friend who used to say, that's not my story to tell. The Doug West version, the Mike version, the Randall Smith version. Those are their story to tell. And they should do that. That's great. I try to tell the story that we could all collect, out in the world. And so that's what I work on trying to do. But after the video's out, I'm tickled to talk to people that have really been that close to the history of it. And I wanted to talk, and Doug was kind enough to talk to me about the whole SLO rectifier debate. And I'm going to share a story about how rectifiers got started and designed according to Doug, and he was there. And then after that, I'm going to actually share with you, I talked to Dan Lurie, who's my good friend from FYD Amps, who, unlike me, has been fixing amplifiers for 35 years and really can read a schematic. And so we had a session where we talked about it. So the Doug story is so great. So Doug's a guitar player. Doug is not an engineer. He's not an amp builder. He's a set of ears at Mesa Boogie, which of course you would want to have, guys who know good guitar tone. And he actually was down in Los Angeles at Warner Studios doing some session work, and he got a phone call from Randy. This is that would have been at the dawn of cell phones, probably, right? He got this call, and he's like, I think we're going to have to do a higher gain, head. You're there at Warner. I want you to see if you can borrow every high gain head you can put your hands on and bring them back with you. And Randy said he paused because he knew what Randy probably didn't remember, which was that he was driving an Alfa Romeo Spider. Now, if anybody doesn't know what that is, it's a two-seater sports car, probably most famously seen in the movie The Graduate. It's a little two-seater. And so Randy's a good employee, so he gets the heads and he loads them in the back of his Spider. That kind of doesn't have a back seat, but it's got space, he puts all the amps in there, and then he realizes he's not going to be able to get the top up. But he's 9 hours from Petaluma, going back to Petaluma, and now it's the end of the day, and he'd always planned to drive back at night, to do the drive at night, but he hadn't planned to have the car full of amps. So he ended up doing the slog back to Petaluma with the top down in the dark all the way, which I mean, just the image of that for me, it's such a great story. And the thing that Doug wanted to point out to me was, again, he he'd visited, these guys all knew each other. He'd visited Mike's shop, but he said, I'm not an engineer. I could look right at the circuit board and I'm not going to, be able to glance and see what's happening there. So that's, I thought that was a really interesting point. And he basically said that, they sat around and listened to all the different amps that they had, and that they talked about what they wanted to keep and what they didn't want. That's the thing, that's where it is. Alper is saying that he'd understood that it actually was all starting from a Fender, which is the perfect segue to my conversation with Dan Lurie. So I got on the phone with Dan, and we're already a quarter after here, so let me speed up a little bit. So Dan pulled up the schematic of an SLO 100 and of an early rectifier, put them up next to each other, and he literally was walking, doing one of these, tennis match things, going back and forth, and trying to get a sense of what the commonalities are between the circuits and what the differences are between the circuits. And of course, yes, there are some similarities between the amps because they are coming from the same place. They're coming from Marshalls, which come from 59, basements. Everybody knows the story, right? That the Marshall is such a dead-on copy of a basement that when they flip the head over, a Marshall is tubes up and a Fender's a tubes down. When they flipped it over, they didn't even change the orientation of the switch. That's why when you turn on a Marshall, you flip it down instead of up. It's such a direct grab of some of that circuit. And then they moved things and they changed values and stuff. So that initial part of that preamp, anything that would be used for the clean, is basically Fender. I mean, Fender lineage, Fender DNA. And then you kind of come up against, so how many gain stages are there total? There are 5 gain stages in each amp. But I quickly asked Dan, I'm like, so how many gain stages are in a 5150? He's like, oh, there's 5. There's 5 gain stages in that as well. And one of those gain stages has what Dan referred to as a cold clipper. I think we're probably venturing into amp tech language, and I'm obviously in over my head, but I'm going to talk. I have built amplifiers under Dan's direction, I'll add. A cold clipper is actually a value of a cathode follower resistor, and it is the value of that changes how that circuit clips, basically the amount of distortion, how much compression of the waveform, how much is getting clipped off, it's sort of like a clean, swoopy thing all the way to a fuzz, square wave. And those two amps actually share a value of being similar, which is actually more than a Marshall. It's a 39K cold clipper, whereas the Marshall has a 10, according to Dan, in the 3rd gain stage. But the reality is that circuit is put together in a way to definitely emphasize, give it a little more scoop. And I think everybody would agree that a rectifier sound is a very scooped sound. So from everything I could come up with, not just the stories from Doug, but also really kind of on the ground research, it sounds to me like that might be an urban myth, that this idea that these particular 2 high gain amps share more topology or even values, that's a whole other thing. So I've got a reminder from Billy that I'm actually at 4:19. So he's saying anytime for questions. Let's start doing some questions. Let me scroll back, and we can look here. Gerson Alves is asking if I do a Marshall edition. I did a video on the JTM 45, Gerson, that really kind of covers all of the amp history. I am going to do a JCM 800 video to kind of cover the later amps. Let's see. I'm looking for questions here. There's my buddy John from New Orleans, watching on the phone while walking the dog. Don't go into traffic, John. And we have Top Chat. Thank you, Josh Ishoy. Just bought my first 5-watt amp, a Fender 57 Champ. Thanks for the great content. You're welcome. I hope you enjoy that Champ. The 57s, those tweed Champs are killer. According to Dave Cobb, go back and watch the video. Don't turn it up above 3 or 4. 3.5 is sort of that wonderland of breakup. Hey, there's Krinar Kilku, my boy in Paris, working on his jazz chops. Everybody should go watch Krenar's channel. It's really great stuff. Okay. Nowhere Man. What's going on with the light? I assume you mean probably the light from the window. It's that's actually open. That's what they call nature out there. So it's just coming in, I think. But thanks for letting me know. And that's why I'm up here bathed in soft light so that the stuff can change in the background and it wouldn't mess up this. Let's see. Looking for questions. Jay Casters. Hey, man. Okay, here's the questions. Have you done anything on Supro? Whoa, we're going right to the list, huh, today? I have not done Supro. It's kind of a two-part history, and the early part of Supro's history was kind of all over. And it's actually one of my rules with, one of my sort of, not a hard rule, but one of the rules with short histories is that the company is current, that it actually helps inform sort of people's current knowledge of it. So that's something that would probably put Supro as a possibility. Oh, that's my buddy Bill. Where do you think Mesa Boogie will go from here? So it's interesting. So Doug actually said that Randy really enjoyed the short history and would like to get on the phone sometime just to say thanks. And I would be delighted to do that. And you can bet for sure that I would ask that question. Bill Sanderson actually has the hand-built GA40 that I built with Dan Lurie, and really killer amp, but yet again, an amp that would sit here and I wouldn't play it that often. I think everybody's hope is that they will actually go ahead and be, as Randy said when they cut the deal back in January, that they would become Gibson's custom amp shop. Gibson's amp custom shop, something like that. That was the phrase. And I think everybody immediately started to salivate on the possibility of seeing some reissued Gibson amps from the 50s and 60s, early 60s. Killer amps. And the Gibson designs aren't like anything else, really. I mean, they share things because the RCA 2 book is sort of the heart of all this stuff. But the reality is that is just the possibility that it's very, very cool. David Kornblatt wants to know if will you own a real Strat? I don't follow the question, David. I own 2 Strats currently. I might be selling them, and I'll let you guys know if I do. I own 2 Eric Johnson Strats, one Rosewood and one Maple. But maybe you're talking about K-lines? I don't know. Are you a John Cordy plant in the stream? I can't recommend. Somebody's asking, Graham Bliley is asking, can I recommend a Champ kit? I can't. That's not something I'm close to. I can tell you that the guys at Mojo Tone, that there are times when people ask Dan to build a direct clone, and what he'll do is actually he'll start with the original boards, which are, the guys at Mojo Tone have an original board style, and then Dan will tweak the circuit to fit the player. And so I've heard good things about the stuff that they use there. Grant Johnson is asking me if you should try nickel strings if he wants a warm or vintage tone. Yeah, that's my understanding. I actually used nickel strings, as I used the Eric Johnson style set on a number of my guitars because they're sort of half flat. That's about as I do actually have flat wounds on my Gibson ES390. But on that red guitar behind me, the Strandberg, I actually have GHS nickel rockers, which are I find warmer and great for that kind of use. So. Billy says, hey, 5 Watt, any info on the Nomad series? I mentioned Nomads, and I understand the guys in Incubus used Nomads. I got that from John Cordy, and that's all I know. So that was it. I'm sorry, I'm not more help on the Nomad. Willie Cahoon says, did Doug mention Soldano when they were developing the rectifier? I covered this. You maybe came in a little late. I talked about the conversation I had with Doug about that. He admitted that they listened to everything that was out there at the time. I will tell you that somebody else kind of pointed out to me an interesting point, which I hadn't thought of in sort of a market way. Soldano amps, I had a good buddy, Kevin Boyer from Burlington, had a Soldano, an original SLO, which, way too loud for him to use in bars in Burlington, but he was loved it. And he was quick to point out that Soldanos were about $3,000, whereas the rectifiers came into the market at a much, much lower price point, which must have been tough, kind of tough on the market at the time. And of course, Mike was probably hardly able to keep up with demand. So back in the day, and I don't know what the status is of that that is now. What is the rectifier cold clipper resistor value? It's a 39K, is my understanding. If you look, if Fluff is still on the stream, Fluff knows a lot about different rectifier versions. There's a ton of versions, and I don't know if the cold clipper was changed later in a later version, but my understanding is the earlier ones did. The 39K was a match. Ivan says, which Mesas have I played, and does Mesa make my perfect and dream amp? To be perfectly honest, they don't. They tend to be more wattage and more weight than I need. There was a time, I briefly owned a 550, and it's funny because this is way, way, way before 5-watt world, and I love the clean sound, but it was just way heavier than I needed it to be, and I actually traded it and got a Princeton. So I just didn't need that kind of wattage at the time. So that's the answer to that. Bill Shea says, do I have an interest in the Strandberg Jazz? I've actually been talking by email with Ola about different models. He told me that one was coming. I just love this one, the one I slightly customized, the Salin. And of course, the Strandberg Jazz is based on that. It has a flat top already, so I really don't kind of understand the pick guard. I don't really scratch it up. And of course, I'm using, this is a unsolicited, I'm using my blue chip picks. This is one of the smaller ones. This is one of the thinner ones. The big ones that I use, they're always in my pocket, this is such a round and fat sound that I get what I need from that with the Lindy Fralin pickups. I understand that they're still developing a lot of pickups, but in the chat, everybody was talking about how far behind everything is, and I understand that there actually are, that the production is coming back online. They've got some new models coming, but everybody is struggling with supply at this point in the world. So the Strandberg Jazz is probably not on my list. Every once in a while, the chat jumps on me here. Glorfman says, Kevin Boyer has been my guitar teacher for a few years. Yeah, he was mine. When I was in my 40s, I kind of came out of my jazz coma and thought I thought for a guy my age, I should know certain songs. And I went in for a lesson with Kevin and I said, what should I work on? And he said, you're a jazz guy. What you play now, go home and turn up the gain way up, and it'll show up kind of the messiness in your muting technique and stuff. And Kevin was, of course, absolutely correct. He's a great guitar teacher. What is the new? Jay Bognap says, what's the newest Boogie amp with cascading gain controls? My understanding is that there's cascading gain in the Mark V's, and that should be there. But I am certainly not an expert. Charlie Haber says, how much can I call Dr. Uncle Doug, where he replaces components like capacitors in these old classic amps? Is this normal or sacrilege? Charlie, so I used to sit, make it sound like I sit at Dan's knee, but I used to sit in Dan's shop on Saturday mornings. I would bring coffee and shwiadel, as they used to say on The Sopranos, and I'd sit while he worked on amps. I do it now, actually. I call Dan on Skype, even though he's in Burlington and I'm in upstate New York, and we just talk. I mean, there aren't that many people that can appreciate the level of artistry that Dan does, and so it's fun. I think it's fun for both of us. I learn a lot. What happens is that parts will drift in value over time. Capacitors will drift up. Typically, resistors, depending on how much it's used and how much the amp is dried out over time. It's interesting, it's fascinating how much an amp is played really impacts how the components age, kind of like a guitar itself, that having the instrument vibrating and being played really changes that. So having those parts changed out. If nothing else, the filter caps have to be replaced every about 20 or 25 years. Though you do hear stories about 50-year-old amps with perfectly good filter caps because they just wear out, they just dry out. So a cap job, as they say in the amp repair business, is a really common thing. S.E. Nesbitt says, my guitar teacher back in the early 80s claimed he saw EVH playing Mesa live, even though the stage read Marshall. True or false? I don't know, S.E. I've never heard that. That's interesting. I have heard that there's a current top sort of guitar guy who had some Comet amplifiers put into other heads so that, he wouldn't get into his whole, artist relation thing, which I thought just didn't surprise me. Donald B 23 says, thanks for doing the live sessions. With some trends moving towards lower wattage and greater portability, you think Gibson might change the general offer from Mesa? That's interesting. Mesa has done some smaller amps over the years, and I wouldn't say it's a current trend. The move towards smaller amps and smaller stage volumes it's running at about 20 years now. I mean, Peter Stroud, who lives right in Rick's neighborhood in Atlanta, if you look at what he uses on stage and has used on stage for a long time with Sheryl Crow, he's using a pair of like 18-watt amps, something for sort of a British Dirt and a Fender Clean. But that's stage volume, and that's been true for a long, long time. I mentioned it in the video, and I think that's absolutely true. So it would be interesting. Gavin W is asking me how I can afford blue chips, and I'll tell you how in a minute. So I think it would be interesting if they did some amps that were a little bit more lightweight and a little bit lower wattage, because I think this whole idea that you need monstrous headroom all the time is interesting. John Mann Production agrees, telling Charlie that you shouldn't worry about changing out parts that necessarily need to be swapped out. Paul Armstrong, the Mojo Tone Champ kits are PCB based. Really? Is that right, Paul? Because I'd be really surprised. So it must be that Dan is swapping those out to a Gearlight board. I mean, a Champ board is so incredibly simple. If you go to Dan's website, I'm going to out him here. If you go to Dan's website and you wait for his slideshow on his first page to go by, there's a gut shot of an amp with black Beauty capacitors and a black Gearlight board. That actually is the inside of my amplifier. That's the inside of the build of the Blackface desktop Champ that Dan and I built. It's an upright amp with it's got tubes up, and it looks like a monoblock, sort of hi-fi amp. Anyway, that's the inside of that. So let's do more questions here. Quincy wants to know if there's a Dumble video in the future. There is, but Quincy, the problem is there's a book. There's an expensive book, if you can even get your hands on one, that was printed in very short run. So I'm going to throw it out to the world here. People have been very generous loaning me stuff. If somebody has the Dumble book, I would be glad to pay shipping to and from and take very good care of it while I work on the video. It seems to be the best reference, the best sort of summing up of everything that has been done about Dumble. I could do it from tons of internet-based research, but I'd really love to see the book. So, and I still need to make the Blackguard video and the Esquire video. Those are still coming too. Let's do more questions here. In your opinion, do you feel that the players prefer Boogie combo amps over their standalone amp heads? I don't know. There's a guy that was early in the chat here named Boogie Randy from Nashville, who for a minute I thought was Randall himself, but he says he's not, because but he still has a pretty substantial collection of Mark amps. And I do think, and I said this to Doug, that I said in the video, that there's sort of this split between sort of the small and very high-powered combos and the head kind of world in Mesa's catalog. And I think they feel that too. He did say to me that I got it absolutely right in the video. My sense that they had trouble keeping up with building enough rectifiers was a huge deal when they went to those. And the chat jumped again. Frank Saldana says, Saldana. Yeah, that's closer. So he wants to see a short history of the Bass 6. That's actually something that I've had a lot of people ask me about. But the reality is that my good friend Zach Childs has done a great video about that already, and I actually talked to him about sort of how to cover the range of things when that was done. So that was very cool. But that's on my list. That's on a list of things to do. Oh, so somebody asked, how can I afford one of these? So I don't lose picks. The pick that's in my pocket is the one that my son gave me and that I talk about in the video on Blue Chips. And the guys at Blue Chip, I did a giveaway for Blue Chip at NAMM 2019. If there was a January NAMM where everybody went and ogled and drooled on the new gear, I'd have done another Blue Chip giveaway with those guys. I just haven't played anything that's the same, and I don't lose them. That's how I can afford them. Matter of fact, when I was working on the Marie Kondo video, I was trying to think of something. She talks about starting with your clothes, and she talks about the things that you have the least attachment to, like, I don't know, socks or something. And I'm like, what is it in the gear world that we have the least attachment to? And the answer is I could get it in the cupboard, but the light's in the way. I have like little tins full of a lifetime of collecting and trying different picks. That doesn't include these. I have like 4. You can't. I'm not going to be able to get this on here, but this has the logo on it. And I actually have talked to Blue Chip, and my copyright paperwork has just gone through for the logo. And you'd be able to order a pick with the 5 Watt World logo on it if you wanted to have one just for grins. You'd be able to order that from the guys at Blue Chip, but you're still paying full price. Their markup is incredibly thin. I've actually talked to them about selling picks in the store, and they make like $3-4 on a pick. I mean, it's just incredibly thin. The material itself is so expensive. So GTS says, what are my thoughts on the Mesa Boogie Heartbreaker? I don't have direct experience with the amp, sorry. Any information with the California Tweed, says NJ Sonia. So I would say on the Tweed, you should go directly to John Cordy. John has a ton of videos on the California Tweed and a lot of different tones, and he's using it as a pedal platform. The other one that's really good is the guys at that pedal show. Mick Taylor owns a California Tweed and really loves that. Victor Eduardo Lopez says, Keith, what would be the next video in the Just One Amp series? That amp is here now, actually, Victor. If I lean, can you see it? In the corner, you can't miss the logo, right? It's huge. There. Okay, now you can see it. That's a Victory V35 copper. I sold my little 10 watt AC10s, which I absolutely love those amps. It's the one I recommend to everybody if they're looking for something at home. Sounds amazing. But I was thinking ahead to jazz gigging, and I wanted to find something that had lower wattage and like 35 watts. If I had, like, let's say I had an outdoor jazz gig. I'm actually putting a trio together with some people up here in upstate. So if I had an outdoor gig, I've got a deluxe Tone Master right here, and I'm kind of feeling a little bit like the deluxes are where I'm going to settle. But I don't know if that Tone Master would be everything outside without a PA. And the kinds of things I'm going to do are going to be a real book gig with upright bass and a vibes player or a piano player. So that's something. So I was very curious. I've always liked the sound of Vox amps. I find them actually pretty easy to dial. I don't find trouble getting a great jazz tone out of a Vox. I mean, John Schofield uses Vox amps. And so that's the next one. But you know me, I need to play something for months. It's right there. I'm playing it. That's the next one. That'll be the next one in the Just One Amp series. Grendel wants to know what gauge picks. The small ones are 35s, 35 millimeter. I think that's what that stands for. And that's the lightest gauge they make. And I'd say that's a heavy, not even extra heavy, maybe just right between heavy and extra heavy. And then the one in my pocket is pretty beefy. I mean, this is actually the same pick that Mike Marshall, the mandolinist, uses. And on this is an extra heavy plus. It's 60 millimeters and has a round tip, if you can see it. So those are the ones I use. And if you call the guys at Blue Chip, they'll know which ones I use. What is the Blue Chip pip made out of? If you look on their website, it'll tell you. It's a special aircraft thing. They're in, where are they? They're in West Virginia, near a place where NASA and there's a power plant. I can't believe I can't come up with the name right now. So that's what it is. So let's see here. Mark Williams wants to know what my opinion is on classic New York City bands. I guess is like spent his youth at CBGB's, huh? Velvet Underground, the Ramones, Blondie, and Television. So in about 1983, I started listening to straight ahead jazz, and I stopped just listening to straight ahead jazz in probably around 2005. Duly, as I've said many times here, duly dubbed my jazz coma by my buddy Rick Beato, and he's part of the fall. He was part of the fall. I took jazz guitar lessons from Rick, so I kind of missed it. Although Blondie and Television overlapped with my and Ramones certainly overlapped with my college years. I was a big Blondie fan. I mean, weren't all youthful, healthy young men fascinated with Blondie? I mean, come on. So let's see. Dariel says, anything I dug up on Nomad? I actually touched on that earlier. Very little information from me, at least. Sorry. Not Mesa related, but I've noticed your private videos that you used newer AC-10s. I own two of them. I owned a pair of them. I thought they were tremendous, really great amps, incredible money, amp for the money. And, you know, it's a pair of EL84s. So the reality is that it says an AC-10 because that's the historic name. But the reality is it's not, it's got to be running more wattage than that. My nephew's going to come by, so I'm going to tell him to hang until 5. Okay. If I could find out what speakers Dumble used in his video, that would be great. Well, you can find out what speakers that famous Dumble users use. Robin Ford uses Celestion 65s, which Rick Beato swears by. He has an old Marshall cabinet with original Celestion 65s. According to everyone, the new ones are not the same. So if you can find the original ones. So if it's Robin Ford tone that you're chasing, then that would be it. I don't think it's hard to find out who your favorite players are. And I would bet we would find out if we went back upstream on that he used different speakers for different players. His whole thing is all different stuff. Jeff Hirschberger is apologizing for being late. Don't worry, Jeff. We love you anyway, man. Hope to see me play live one day. Ryan Full Dark says he's in the neighborhood. So if I'm playing live, I'll be dragging you up on stage, dude. Okay, and it does another big jump again. How about a video on Angle amps? Florian Stockinger says, would love that. The thing about the amps, the series in general, and I've mentioned this before, is that it's got to be a subject that's broad enough to draw a lot of views because it takes me so long to build them. That's the thing. To make the videos, I've got to know that I'm going to see, 100,000 views over time, which I I could do this sometime in a stream, talk about how much that does or doesn't make, and it varies completely by other things too. So anyway, it's got to be a big enough thing. I'm not sure Engel would do that. Rex Navarro says he'd like to see Gibson release a limited King Snake. Yeah, I mean, I think they're kind of overdue. They did them for about every 10 years. Boogie Randy was saying that he has a 1990 reissue and a 2000 reissue. So I think they're kind of due. Paul's back to say that the Mojo Tone kit is not PCB. Cool. Curtis R. and Krino are talking about Julian Lage's gear. If you want to talk more about that, guys, that's something I follow pretty closely. He just really did the one tour with the Champ. Even in the studio, he's using slightly bigger amps in the studio. And Krino, you should reach out to me. We'll talk about getting, you know what, we'll get on John about finding out, getting good modeler tones that are really dialed back tweeds. Rory Lisbon is asking if I've compared tube-based preamp box pedals, like the Vox, used in front of a solid-state clean amplifier. Well, I haven't, but the guys from Victory really wanted me to check out the tube-based pedal in front of like a Fender-style amp that goes with the V35, the copper pedal. So they sent one of those as well. It's out in the other room. I haven't plugged it in yet, but I will actually be using it with both. Tube-based pedals, I mean, man, you're talking about some really expensive stuff. The Kingsley stuff is, by all accounts, the top of the heap, and I'm a huge fan of his playing, and the people that he follows are the people that I kind of follow. So, John Gramatine's correcting my millimeter information, which is, he says it's thousandths of an inch. Oh, cool. Thanks, John. Thanks. The guys at Blue Chip will thank you too. Richard Knoll says, which Captor X, if the 16 or the 8 ohm, if his Sodano has a selector for either? Most amps want to be at one or the other, but I'll tell you that there's a famous amp designer named Kevin O'Connor from Canada, who I read a bunch of his books that Dan owns, and he basically said that you can talk about impedance as long as it's not more than 100% mismatched. You're really just talking about some changes in tone. And I'm sure that people know more about amps than I do, can jump in there and let me have it to the extent that I've got it wrong. I have a number of amps which are switchable, and I've mismatched speakers. I have a copy of a Ampeg flip-top bass amp, and Jess Oliver, the designer of that amplifier, was still alive, and he told me to use a mismatched speaker to get the tone that he originally had that was in current production, which is just a 15-inch Alnico Jensen speaker. And I just had a Z Master here, if you've been following the live stream, from Dr. Z, which is a copy of a 59 Bassman 310, with 310 speakers. And because it's 310s, the impedance is really mismatched. It sounded incredible. That amplifier, it was really hard for me to send that down to Jeff so that Jeff could use it for the video that we're working on for the summer. John Trump says, fascinated with Blondie or Debbie. I think we all know the answer to that question, John. AC10 over a Champ. Wow. The AC10's got a master volume. It has onboard the digital reverb. I personally thought the reverb was completely usable. I'm not going to play surf music on the thing where you're going to hear it in a ton. But that's definitely a thing. Miguel Naranjo wants to know what's the best Mesa Boogie blues amp. I'd say you could do blues with any of these besides a rectifier. I mean, they would tell you that they're a blues. They laughed when I said that they were a hippie blues rock company. I guess the guys thought that was pretty funny, the guys at Mesa Boogie, because that's sort of how they've always thought of themselves. And so I would say any of these. The Fillmore is an amp that's sort of living in the blackface to tweed world, which would make a great amp. Walter Trout, who's a classic blues guy, uses Mark V. I said that in the video. So I would say any of those would work. Martin Michaels wants to know Strandberg Classic versus Salin. What are my thoughts? So I assume you mean a classic Bowden. One is basically more of a Strat style with a tremolo, very different, and this is way different as well. So for me, Salins really are the place for me. Although, as I said, they're kind of hinting that they've got a whole bunch of new things coming, and so I'm excited to see what they've got coming out. Mark Williams, yeah, Mark, they just corrected me. That's not 35 millimeters is over an inch. I guess that's 35 1/1000ths of an inch is what that really is. Where are we for time? We're at 4:50. Let's do some questions. Have you tried a Champ X2? If so, what did I think? So I get confused between the X2 and the XD. I think the X2 was the later one. The Champ XD, if I think, was the earlier one. And it has a pair of 6v6s. And my buddy Jared Taylor, the guy I used to do jams with when I lived in New Hampshire on Wednesday nights, had an XD in his office. I couldn't believe how great it sounded. So I think the fact that that it's a small enough amp that you're getting your foot into the power section, even at it was a room about this size, and there were three of us jamming over real book tunes or funk tunes. And so it sounded great. Fictino wants me to talk about Mesa Fillmore. I don't have direct experience with the Fillmore. I just know what I read. And unfortunately, that's probably every bit of it's in the video. I understand that it's based on kind of going back towards the Tweed stuff. And that's a thing. Tinkerbell's reminding everybody to hit the thumbs up. Yes, please do hit the thumbs up. Have I ever tried an actual Oliver amp? I've never even heard of Oliver amps. So, Alt Grendel says surf jazz. That's a thing. That's a real thing. I actually am a huge fan of people like Brad Meldow that do jazz improvising, covers of things like Radiohead. I love that line that you have to walk between, or like doing Fragile by Sting. My band used to play that. And you walk the line between sort of the original version and complete supermarket schmaltz, fromage version. It's funny. My band used to play. I used to play the chord changes to a Brouwer Etude number 6, a classical guitar piece. The chords are killer. And I never knew this because I was in my jazz coma, that Randy Rhoads used that as the intro to a tune. And the funny thing was, I heard from Rick that actually Ozzy's management company put a copyright strike on somebody who was playing the original music that Randy had ripped off as the intro to Diary for a Madman, which I love that sort of layers of who borrowed from what. And then really it's just a set of chord changes. And as we all know, that's supposed to be, it's really supposed to be about the melody, not the chord changes that are copyrighted. Jason saying, hoping doing well, and he loves his Mark 525. Yeah, Rick's brother, actually John, is in a cover band, and for a long time used a 525 head, a really small little compact rig, and he actually finally switched to a Helix because it's even more compact and has more stuff. Do you have any suggestions on safely daisy chaining two Fender amps? I get scared. One is a 66 Fiber Champ, the other is a 62 Deluxe. I do not know how to do that. I know people like Robin Ford chain them together into one in the inputs and then out the input again, and then over to the input of the other amp. And theoretically, there's a lawyer somewhere cringing as I say this aloud. Theoretically, that should have a single ground. And the problem is that if voltage doesn't know where to go, but there shouldn't be really voltage coming there. At the input output, you shouldn't have voltage there, so it should be okay. Boston Roland, obvious short histories, huge company histories though. I've actually thought about doing the Roland 808 drum machine because of the huge impact on time. Black Hat Music is reminding me that right down in Horseheads, New York, Voodoo Amps It's really great stuff, and that's what I've always heard. I've always heard really good things about those guys, and they actually had some amps that I wanted to borrow for a video, and they belonged to Steve Perry, so they couldn't loan them out. Okay, another big jump. Jeff Halper's asking about Mesa REVERBs. I can't answer that. Somebody in the stream might be able to answer that better than I could. Could a Mark 525 be used as a good pedal platform? Yeah, absolutely. I think it's plenty loud enough. That's how John Beato was using his. Okay, people are really showing up and piling in the questions in the last 5 minutes here. Patrick Carroll says he just bought an HX Stomp. Do you still believe in its capabilities? I don't have the Line 6 power cab like you do, but I like one of them down the line. I can tell you that I've only used the Line 6 power cab, but right now, yeah, I do love my Stomp still. It's probably my main delay and reverb sounds, and I just love the flexibility of it. It's on this little tiny pedal board here that's got 2 drive pedals and then a Stomp, and that's it. And actually, I have it running into the front. Right here, I have it running into the front of my Tone Master, and it sounds killer. It sounds really great. And then, of course, you end up with a really flexible, very small, very light rig using it in front of it. I don't have experience with quilters, but people rave about those. Jazz guys really rave about quilters, having a nice, sort of harmonic structure, aka the amps. Scott W. Mateo's asking me Fuchs versus Mesa. I haven't played Fuchs. There's guys on the channel who love theirs. Got some top chat here. Leadface just throwing out money. Keep it up. No questions. Always glad to see that. Thanks, guys. Thank you, Leadface. I had a lot of people. Ezzy Merlino is saying that I didn't talk about John Sykes. Yeah, the number of people that used Mesas is crushing. It was so hard to decide who to include, and I was just trying to have a variety. Are there any clubs or venues that if you did a brief history would draw 100,000 views? Excited to see live music again. That's a really interesting question. I think you could do a history of the Fillmore, East, or West for that matter. You could have done CBGBs. There's clubs that have that kind of thing. Birdland, reopened. I was at Sweet Basil's before they closed. There's a lot of, but I don't know. You go straight jazz history, you're not going to get it. Short history of Trainer or Garnet. I don't know Garnet. Trainer is an amp I used to see all the time in Vermont because it's so close to Canada, but I haven't seen them since. Let's see here. Steve Barry's asking, what do I think about the 5-band EQs on the Marks? I love the EQ on a 2 and 3, but I haven't owned a non-EQ Mark. I can't answer that. Sorry. I have heard that people find the non-EQ amps difficult to tweak sometimes for their rig, but that's hearsay. Graham Briley, I haven't tried the TC Plethora. Sorry. As you can tell, I'm not a big shopper. I'm really trying to keep it lean. Bill Sanders says the Winterland Ballroom. That's a very good call, Bill. Billy, you're calling me on the phone when I'm on the stream. Dude, don't do that. We're almost done here. Or maybe because the video's down? Did we crash and burn here? Oh, yeah, we did. Let's see. Let's see if we can get its attention. Maybe it's a camera issue. Hey, Billy.
Your video's gone.
Yeah, is the audio still on, everybody?
Yep. Video's gone now.
Isn't that lovely? I have such a good, clean history of crashing and burning right at the end of the stream. I think we'll just wrap it up today. So I'll just thanks, Billy. So thanks everybody for showing up right at the bell here, and I will be back in 2 weeks and for another live stream. And thanks again for everybody coming out. All right.